Pinned to the cold mud with the metallic tang of the storm coating her tongue, she endured the agony of Dominic Stefan tearing the mate bond from her chest. The pack had always called her a runt, a broken omega. What they failed to realize was that the leash they had just snapped was the only thing keeping them safe from her. To the outside world, the Obsidian Ridge Pack was just Stefan Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar timber and real estate conglomerate dominating the Pacific Northwest. They had politicians in their pockets, skyscrapers in Seattle, and gated estates sprawling across the Cascadia Basin. But behind the closed doors of their glass-paneled boardrooms, the ancient, brutal hierarchy of wolves remained the absolute law. And in that hierarchy, Helena Knox was nothing. For 21 years, she was the pack's designated punching bag, an omega. In modern terms, that meant she was an indentured servant on a corporate payroll, legally bound by blood oaths disguised as ironclad non-disclosure agreements. Her parents died in a mysterious car crash on Interstate 5 when she was 6, leaving her as a ward of the pack. From the moment she presented at 16 without a wolf form, only a weak, feverish sickness that left her bedridden for weeks, her fate was sealed. Helena was forced to work in the subterranean archives of the Stefan Tower, sorting centuries of pack lineage records. She was paid below minimum wage, forced to avert her eyes when an alpha or beta stepped into the elevator, and subjected to weekly, painful medical injections by the pack physician, Dr. Harrison. He told her the injections were a synthetic, aconite derivative, necessary to keep her defective, festering biology from poisoning her own blood. She believed him. When someone is told their entire life that they are broken, they don't question the people offering them bandages. The true nightmare began on the night of the Winter Solstice Gala. It was an event meant to cement the empire. Dominic Stefan, the 26-year-old alpha of Obsidian Ridge, was set to announce his engagement to Victoria Sinclair, a ruthless, high-ranking beta from a powerful banking family in New York. Dominic was a terrifying figure, tall, impeccably tailored, with eyes like chipped flint, and a predatory aura that made humans physically nauseous if they stood too close. He ruled through fear, treating omegas as disposable assets. Helena was only at the gala because the catering staff was short-handed, and omegas were drafted as unpaid labor. She was carrying a tray of champagne flutes through the grand ballroom of the Stefan estate, keeping her head down, her cheap, ill-fitting uniform scratching against her skin. Then, the clock struck midnight. It happened with the violence of a car crash. A scent hit her cedar, ozone, and dark chocolate. It bypassed her lungs and slammed directly into her soul. The champagne flutes rattled on her tray. Across the room, amidst a sea of silk and tailored tuxedos, Dominic Stefan froze. The fated mate bond. A biological absolute that even a billionaire alpha couldn't buy his way out of. Dominic's head snapped toward her. For one fleeting, terrifying second, their eyes locked. She felt the ancient, primal tether snap into place, linking her heart to his. A gasp rippled through the room as the alpha's overwhelming aura flared, choking the air. The music stopped. Hundreds of elite wolves turned to look at the trembling omega in the stained catering uniform. Victoria Sinclair, standing beside Dominic in a diamond-encrusted gown, sneered. "Dominic? What is this?" Helena couldn't breathe. Her inner wolf, the creature she had thought dead or defective, clawed at her chest, desperate to submit, desperate to go to her mate. She took a half-step forward, tears prickling her eyes. "Alpha," she whispered, the word tasting like ash and honey. Dominic's expression twisted from shock into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. He didn't walk toward her. He stalked. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He stopped inches from her, his towering frame casting a shadow over her trembling body. "You?" he hissed, his voice dropping to a low, vibrating growl that rattled her teeth. "A filthy, wolfless runt? The universe has a sick sense of humor." "Dominic, please," she choked out, the mate bond urging her to seek his comfort. He backhanded her. The strike was so fast, so laden with alpha strength, that she was thrown off her feet, crashing into a pillar. The tray of champagne shattered, raining glass over her skin. Pain exploded across her cheek, but it was nothing compared to the agony in her chest. "Listen to me, you worthless parasite," Dominic roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. He grabbed her by the collar of her uniform, hauling her up so her bleeding face was inches from his. "I am building an empire. I need a queen who can bear me alpha heirs, not a genetic dead end who scrubs floors. I, Dominic Stefan, alpha of the Obsidian Ridge, completely and irrevocably reject you, Helena Knox, as my mate." The rejection severed the bond with the force of a physiological amputation. She screamed, blood pouring from her nose and mouth as her nervous system short-circuited. The pain was blinding, white-hot, tearing through every cell. Around her, the elite members of the pack laughed. Victoria Sinclair smiled, sipping her drink. "Throw her out," Dominic commanded, dropping her into the shards of glass. "If she steps foot on pack territory again, kill her." Security guards dragged her limp, bleeding body out the service doors, tossing her into the freezing, torrential rain of the Seattle night. She lay there in the mud, coughing up blood, waiting for death to take her. But as the freezing rain washed over her skin, something strange happened. The crushing, suffocating weight she had carried her entire life, the weight of Dr. Harrison's injections, the weight of the mate bond, the weight of her submission was suddenly gone. Dominic hadn't just rejected her. He had accidentally severed the chains, keeping her true nature suppressed. She didn't die in the mud. Driven by an instinct she didn't recognize, Helena crawled to her beat-up 1998 Honda Civic, parked miles away at the edge of the estate. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass, but a strange, terrifying heat was building in the center of her chest. It wasn't the warmth of a fever, it was the hum of a nuclear reactor waking up. She drove east, away from the city, away from the Stefan Empire, deep into the treacherous, uncharted territories of the Cascade Mountains. This was rogue country, a sprawling wilderness where pack laws meant nothing and feral wolves tore intruders apart. She didn't care. She needed isolation. She parked the car on an abandoned logging road and stumbled into the dense, ancient forest. The full moon was bleeding through the canopy of Douglas firs, casting long, silver shadows on the forest floor. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the orange prescription bottle of Dr. Harrison's pills. For years he had told her her blood was toxic, but as she looked at the pills under the moonlight, a sudden, blinding realization hit her. The smell of the pills. It was wolfsbane, heavily diluted, but unmistakable. They hadn't been treating a sickness. They had been poisoning her since she was a child. They had been keeping her wolf in a coma. With a scream of rage, she threw the bottle into the ravine. The withdrawal hit her seconds later. It started as a tremor in her hands and quickly escalated into a violent seizure. She collapsed onto the moss, her body contorting. The pain of the rejection was a distant memory compared to this. Her bones began to crack, popping and lengthening in a grotesque symphony. Skin tore and knitted together in milliseconds. Most wolves shift in a matter of seconds, an easy, fluid transition. Hers was an agonizing rebirth. She screamed to the empty woods as her spine arched, but then the pain vanished, replaced by an intoxicating surge of absolute unrivaled power. She opened her eyes. The world had changed. She could see the individual veins on the leaves of the trees 50 yards away. She could hear the heartbeat of a field mouse deep underground. And when she looked down at her paws, she froze. Omegas were typically small, wiry wolves with dull brown or gray coats. But the beast she had become was massive, easily standing at the shoulder of a standard alpha, and her fur wasn't dull. It was a blinding, iridescent white that seemed to weave the moonlight directly into its strands. She wasn't just reflecting light, she was glowing with it. She let out a howl. It wasn't the high-pitched yip of an omega. It was a deep, resonant sound that shook the very earth, silencing every nocturnal predator for miles. The air around her crackled with static electricity. A twig snapped. She spun around, baring teeth that felt like daggers. Stepping out from the shadows of the tree line was a massive black wolf. Its eyes were a chilling amber, carrying the heavy, suffocating scent of a dominant alpha. She recognized the scent instantly from the old pack files. Silas Montgomery, Silas was a legend, a former prodigy of Obsidian Ridge, who had refused to bow to Dominic's tyrannical father and was exiled. He had built his own shadow empire in the underground, a network of rogues and mercenaries. He was known to be ruthless, a killer who answered to no one. The black wolf approached, its muscles coiled to strike. She braced herself for a fight to the death. She was newly shifted, and he was a veteran killer. But as Silas stepped into the clearing, the silver light radiating from her coat hit him. The wind carried her scent to him, not the scent of a submissive Omega, but something ancient, something raw, something the pack archives referred to only in myths long thought to be fairy tales. The moon-blessed progenitor line, the original wolves from which all alphas were descended. Silas froze. The aggression drained from his massive frame, replaced by an undeniable, instinctual awe. To her absolute shock, the legendary bloodthirsty rogue lowered his head. His front paws buckled, and he dropped his belly to the moss, submitting completely to her. He shifted back into his human form, a tall, ruggedly handsome man with scars tracing his torso and eyes that held the weight of 100 wars. He knelt naked in the dirt, keeping his head bowed, exposing his throat to her in the ultimate gesture of surrender. "I thought the bloodline was extinct," Silas murmured, his voice a gravelly baritone that sent a strange shiver down her spine. "You're the lost heir, the true alpha of the West." She shifted back, collapsing to her knees as the sheer exhaustion of the transformation caught up with her. She grabbed her torn clothes, trembling. I'm Helena. I'm just an Omega." Silas raised his head, his amber eyes burning with a fierce, terrifying loyalty. He looked at her bruised face, at the dried blood from Dominic's rejection. His jaw clenched, and the air around him dropped 10 degrees as his killing intent flared, not directed at her, but at the ones who had hurt her. "You were never an Omega, Helena," Silas said softly, stepping forward to drape his heavy flannel shirt over her shivering shoulders. "They poisoned you because they knew if you ever woke up, you would destroy them." He looked toward the city lights of Seattle, glowing faintly on the horizon. Dominic Stephan thought he threw away garbage. He doesn't realize he just handed the keys to his empire to his own executioner. Silas offered her his hand. "Let me teach you how to use your teeth, Helena. Let's bring the Obsidian Ridge to its knees." She looked at the hand of the exiled king, then back toward the city where her abusers slept comfortably in their silk sheets. The frightened, abused Omega inside her was dead, buried under the mud outside the Stephan estate. She reached out and took his hand. "Teach me." The Olympic Peninsula is a sprawling, unforgiving labyrinth of jagged peaks and impenetrable rainforests. For 6 months it was her crucible. Silas Montgomery didn't just live in the woods. He commanded a hidden fortress carved into the side of Mount Washington, funded by a network of exiled wolves, disenfranchised tech billionaires, and rogue mercenaries known as the Shadow Court. When Silas brought her there, broken, shivering, and terrified of her own skin, they didn't look at her with pity. They looked at her with reverence. To them, the White Wolf wasn't a myth. She was the rightful queen returning to her throne. But she didn't feel like a queen. The first 2 months were a living hell. The wolfsbane withdrawal racked her body with violent night terrors and phantom pains. Decades of Dr. Harrison's synthetic poison had woven itself into her bone marrow. Every time she tried to shift, her inner wolf fought against the residual chains of her conditioning. Silas never left her side. The terrifying, legendary rogue alpha became her anchor. He would sit by her bed for days, his massive hand holding hers, his deep, rumbling voice grounding her when the fever spiked. "You are not fighting the poison, Helena," Silas told her one evening. They were standing on the training grounds, an open plateau overlooking the Puget Sound. The wind whipped through her hair. "You are fighting your own mind. Dominic Stephan trained you to flinch. You have to unlearn the flinch." "He was my fated mate, Silas," she whispered, the old phantom scar on her chest aching dully. "Even rejected, the ghost of that bond makes me feel sick. It makes me feel small." Silas stepped closer, his amber eyes burning with an intensity that made the air heavy. He reached out, gently cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing over the faint white scar where her cheek had hit the shattered glass. "The fated mate bond is biology, Helena. It is a roll of the genetic dice. but a chosen mate that is forged in fire. And I am telling you, as an alpha who has bowed to no one, I choose you, not because of your white coat, but because you survived. His lips met hers, and the world stopped spinning. There was no forceful, overwhelming alpha demand like the one that choked the air around Dominic. This was a partnership, an equal exchange of power. The kiss ignited a spark in her chest that roared into a blinding inferno. Her inner wolf threw her head back and howled in her mind. The last of the wolfsbane burned away, reduced to ash by the sheer force of their chosen bond. When she opened her eyes, they weren't their usual hazel. They were glowing, luminous silver. She shifted. It wasn't agonizing this time. It was as smooth as breathing. Her massive, iridescent white wolf stood proud on the cliffside, her aura rolling off her in waves of pure, crackling ozone and winter frost. The entire compound of Rogue's hundreds of battle-hardened wolves dropped to their knees in the dirt, exposing their throats. She was ready. But revenge required more than just teeth. It required strategy. They moved their operation into the command center, a room lined with monitors and servers. Silas introduced her to Leo Fitzgerald, a brilliant, exiled beta who had previously engineered the cybersecurity infrastructure for Stefan Holdings before Dominic framed him for embezzlement. "I've been chipping at Stefan's firewalls for 3 years," Leo explained, his fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard. "But they use biometric, localized servers for the black archives, the real PAC secrets. I couldn't get in without an inside tether." I was the inside tether, Helena realized, stepping up to the monitors. "For 5 years, I sorted the physical archives in the sub-basement. I know the filing structures. I know, Doctor." Harrison's cataloging system. Guided by her memory, Leo bypassed the decoy servers and smashed through the encrypted back door of the black archives. What they found over the next 48 hours shattered the last remnants of the naive girl she used to be. "Look at this," Leo said, his voice trembling as he pulled up a digitized medical ledger from 20 years ago. It was a blood panel, labeled with her parents' names, William and Sarah Knox. Beside it was a note signed by Arthur Stefan, Dominic's father. The infant shows conclusive markers of the moon-blessed genotype. The bloodline was supposed to be eradicated. If the other packs find out, the Stefan lineage's claim to alpha supremacy will be nullified. Terminate the parents, sedate the child, maintain containment via Harrison's compound. Her breath hitched. They didn't die in a car crash on Interstate 5. They were murdered. Leo pulled up another file, dated only weeks ago. It was a contract between Dominic Stefan and Victoria Sinclair's family, the Sinclair Trust. "This isn't a marriage, Helena. It's a corporate monopoly. The Sinclairs own the largest unmapped silver deposits in the Yukon. Dominic isn't just merging packs. He's building a silver weaponized armory to exterminate the rogue populations. He's going to cleanse the west coast of anyone who doesn't bow to him." Silas growled, the sound vibrating the tactical maps on the table. "When do they finalize the merger?" "Tomorrow night," Leo said, looking at her. "At the Apex Summit. It's being held at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in downtown Seattle. Every major Pac Alpha from California to British Columbia will be there to witness the signing." She stared at the digital signature of the man who had ordered her parents' deaths, the man who had poisoned her, and the man who had discarded her like trash in the mud. The fear was entirely gone, replaced by a terrifying, absolute calm. "Silas," she said, her voice eerily steady, "gather the Shadow Court. We are going to a summit." The Fairmont Olympic Hotel was a fortress of gilded luxury, swarming with Stefan Holdings' private security. Outside, a torrential Seattle downpour washed the city's streets, a poetic reflection of the night her life had supposedly ended. Inside the grand ballroom, beneath crystal chandeliers and vaulted ceilings, the elite of the werewolf world gathered. It was a sea of tailored Tom Ford suits, designer gowns, and predatory smiles. On a raised dais at the front of the room stood Dominic Stefan, looking every bit the tyrannical king, holding a crystal glass of bourbon. Beside him was Victoria Sinclair, her hand resting possessively on his arm, holding a silver-plated fountain pen ready to sign the merger documents. Alphas, betas, honored guests, Dominic projected his voice, the heavy, suffocating scent of his alpha pheromones demanding the room's attention. Tonight, we do not just merge two families. We forge an unbreakable dynasty. With the Sinclair resources and the Stefan manpower, the era of rogue instability is over. We will bring absolute order to the West. Applause erupted, polite but laced with underlying fear. No one dared oppose him, until the mahogany double doors of the ballroom exploded inward. The heavy wood splintered, the deafening crack silencing the room instantly. 2 Stefan security guards were thrown through the air, crashing into a table of hors d'oeuvres. The applause died. Hundreds of heads snapped toward the entrance. Helena walked through the shattered doorway. She wasn't wearing a stained caterer's uniform. She wore a tailored, plunging black suit, her hair falling in loose, dark waves over her shoulders. Her eyes were completely silver, glowing in the dim light of the ballroom. Flanking her on her right was Silas Montgomery, radiating lethal intent, and behind them poured 50 of the highest-ranking, most terrifying rogue fighters of the Shadow Court. The room erupted into chaos, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She simply released the hold on her aura. The moon-blessed presence hit the room like a physical shockwave. It bypassed their physical senses and struck directly at their ancient biological coding. Wine glasses shattered in people's hands. Dozens of Alphas men and women who ruled cities gasped, their knees buckling as the overwhelming, absolute authority of the progenitor bloodline forced them into submission. Dominic gripped the podium, his knuckles turning white, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and sheer, unadulterated terror. He stared at her, his nostrils flaring as he took in her scent. The weak, defective omega smell was gone. In its place was the scent of a goddess. Helena? Dominic breathed, the words stumbling out of his mouth. Impossible. You're dead. You should have made sure, Dominic, she said, her voice amplified by the power vibrating in her chest, echoing off the walls. She walked slowly down the center aisle. The crowd parted, not out of disgust this time, but out of absolute reverence. Victoria Sinclair sneered, stepping forward. Guards, kill these rogues. The remaining Stefan security forces shifted, their bones cracking as they prepared to attack. Sit down, Helena commanded. She didn't yell, she just spoke. The command carried the weight of the moon itself. Instantly, every Stefan guard collapsed to the floor, whining, their inner wolves brutally suppressed by her voice. Dominic's face twisted in fury. He pushed Victoria aside and stepped down from the dais. I am the Alpha of Obsidian Ridge. I reject your presence. I am your fated mate, and I commanded you to break. You rejected a broken Omega, Silas laughed darkly, stepping forward, his amber eyes locked on Dominic. You severed the only tether that was keeping her from becoming your nightmare. Leo, now, she said softly into a small earpiece. On the massive projector screens meant to display the Sinclair Stefan corporate logos, the images flickered and changed. Suddenly, Dr. Harrison's medical logs filled the screens. Then, the undeniable audio recordings of Arthur Stefan ordering the assassination of William and Sarah Knox echoed through the ballroom's sound system. Finally, the digitized contracts detailing Dominic's plan to weaponize silver to genocide the rogue populations were displayed for every visiting Alpha to see. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The visiting Alphas, who had been cowed into submission by Dominic's wealth, now looked at him with absolute disgust. Killing in a challenge was one thing. Assassinating pack members to hide a bloodline and planning a mass genocide broke the most sacred, ancient laws of their kind. You're a fraud, Dominic, she said, stopping 10 feet from him. Your empire is built on the blood of my parents and the suppression of my birthright. The Obsidian Ridge Pack is forfeit. I'll tear your throat out, Dominic roared. His tailored suit ripped apart as he shifted, transforming into a massive, heavily scarred gray and black wolf. He lunged at her, his jaws snapping for her neck, fueled by the desperate, manic energy of a cornered tyrant. Silas moved to intercept him, but she held up a hand. He's mine. She didn't even fully shift. She simply let the moon-blessed energy coat her body. As Dominic's massive jaws closed in on her, she sidestepped with blinding speed, grabbing the thick scruff of his neck. With a surge of supernatural strength, she slammed the 200-pound alpha face first into the marble floor. The marble cracked under the impact. Dominic scrambled, trying to bite her arm, but she drove her knee into his spine and released a concentrated blast of her aura directly into his mind. Submit. The command wasn't a request. It was an absolute, biological mandate. Dominic's massive gray wolf froze. A pitiful, high-pitched whine escaped his throat. The alpha who had terrorized the West Coast, the man who had kept her in chains and poisoned her for years, went limp. He tucked his tail, flattened his ears, and pressed his belly to the shattered marble, exposing his throat to her in front of the entire werewolf elite. Victoria Sinclair dropped her fountain pen, backing away in horror before turning and fleeing out the side doors, abandoning the sinking ship. Helena looked up from the trembling wolf beneath her and met the eyes of the visiting pack leaders. One by one, the alphas of California, Oregon, and British Columbia stepped forward, crossing their arms over their chests, and bowed their heads to her. "The Obsidian Ridge Pack is dissolved," she announced to the silent room. "Stefan Holdings will be liquidated. The assets will be distributed to rebuild the territories your family destroyed, Dominic. And you will spend the rest of your pathetic life in the Black Archives, locked in the very basement you forced me to scrub." She turned away from him, the ghost of the terrified Omega finally put to rest. Silas walked toward her, his eyes filled with fierce pride. He took her hand, raising it for the room to see. They didn't just break the Stefan Empire that night, they broke the wheel. The glass towers of Stefan Holdings now operate as sanctuaries, funding rogue rehabilitation and pack integration across the continent. Dominic rots in a silver-lined cell, forgotten by the world he tried to conquer. As for Helena, she no longer hid in the shadows or flinched at the rain. Alongside Silas, she ruled a united West, not with synthetic poisons or tyranny, but with the unyielding, luminous strength of the moon-blessed queen.
Hi, my name is King's Obsession Concord, the owner and manager of King's Obsession Concord. After watching the video, they mocked her as a worthless Omega, until her hidden moon-blessed wolf brought the Alpha Empire to its knees. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the way the main character kept going despite being underestimated and judged by others. There's something powerful about seeing someone discover strength that was hidden beneath the surface all along. It's a reminder that people often have more potential than others can see. One lesson I took from this story is that we shouldn't let other people's opinions define our value. Sometimes growth happens quietly, and our greatest strengths may not be obvious right away. Have you ever been underestimated and later surprised people with what you could do? And which moment in the story stood out to you the most? Maybe the takeaway is to trust your own abilities a little more, even when others doubt you. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, feel free to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching and being part of the channel.